Okay, disruption, real data, fake news, three things we're all interested in, and here to help us understand how that works in the context of trying to increase reader engagement while also getting our fair share of the advertising pie is the President of Classifieds and Marketing Media for Axel Springer, Andreas Wiele. Please be up there. Right. See, that's not fair. That really isn't.
Thank you very much. Chris, congratulations, great speech. You are a very tough act to follow. After our talk about artificial intelligence, let's get back to publishing life as it stands right now. And I want to spend the next 15-20 minutes to talk to you about near-death experiences, about sharks and carps, about cannibalization, and about soul. So go figure what that has to do with publishing. I hope you'll know it in 20 minutes' time. And I would like to start out with a little film that shows what the core of our business is, has been, and always will be. It is about journalism. Well, that's, I guess, pretty heavy stuff for a Tuesday morning. All these were journalists from our company, all things that happened in the last 12 months. So these times, I think, are a very strong reminder what our industry is truly about and what the real soul and importance of our company is, and that we have to give the first credit to our journalists who risk their lives, and that unfortunately no machine will ever be able to replace that, or perhaps also to a certain extent. Luckily, we are human beings and we will always need human beings to do our job. So this is the core, the soul of our business, and which also makes us a very special and different industry. And the founder of our company, he started the company in 1946, and I will tell you a little bit about his story, because it is very telling in many ways. Axel Springer started after World War II, based on the strong and horrible experiences he had lived through in World War II. He had seen the suffering of especially the Jewish population in Germany. He had, after the war, seen the separation of Germany into two states. And so he started the company with a strong belief that freedom and democracy are to be upheld, that Germany has to pay its debt to reconcile with the Jewish population, defend the state of Israel, and also to help to reunite the two separated Germans. You can actually see him here standing right in front of the wall. This is our headquarters to the right. This is East Germany to the left, and the wall is right behind him. And you are sitting here in East Berlin, about 500 meters away from this space where the wall used to be, and that's only 27, 28 years later. So that shows how history can change and how people, but also media, can help change history. Axel Springer was not only a visionary and a true journalist, but he was also a serial entrepreneur, and he would truly be called a serial entrepreneur today, because between 1946 and 2000, he started the largest magazines of Germany, the largest newspapers of Germany, regional newspapers, daily newspapers, especially Bild newspaper, which is was the largest selling newspaper in the world, with at the peak almost 6 million copies sold every day. Sunday newspaper, 2.5 million copies sold every day. He started the largest television magazine, listing magazines in Europe. He internationalized the business. So he was a true successful serial entrepreneur, and he turned basically by himself. He grew the company into a company with almost 3 billion turnover, 14,000 employees, with 81 titles in 5 countries. A wonderful story. And then what happened then, we all know that it's by now already history. Then obviously the digitization started, and that picture is not a new picture anymore, but it's always telling to see in how little time behavior of people just has radically changed. And as all successful companies, Axel Springer missed the boat and had a near-death, sorry, I need to go back one, near-death experience. I'm having a near-death experience with a clicker here. Okay, see, 2000, 2001, the year where the internet was blooming, the economy was doing very well, and what did Axel Springer do? Not only between 1999 and 2000, where almost every company in the world grew profits, we already shrank profits, and in 2001 had a horrible loss of 200 million euros. And the Financial Times quoted us nicely: Europe's largest press conglomerate, a mere internet midget. At least they have a strategy now, okay? It was in October 2000. Financial Times Germany is not around anymore. They didn't have a real strategy, but at least they have a strong opinion, as journalists are allowed to do. And so what did we do? What was our strategy? And now it jumps over so fast. Our answer is, if you are convinced that your business will go down because there is simply a better offering, a technological breakthrough, then there is only one way forward, which actually takes here 3 different forms, but it is principally only one way forward. You have to cannibalize yourself, and you have to do that with full speed and with full determination, because the outsiders who do not own a legacy business, they do not mind attacking your business. So you truly have to cannibalize yourself, you have to disrupt yourself, but you also have to trust yourself in what you think sets you apart, and what you think can help your business to be better in cannibalizing, because otherwise there is no reason why you should even start to be better than the companies that are growing newly in your space, because then they have only the advantage and you don't have any of them. So let me give you a couple of examples what I mean by this. But first, what was a very simple strategy that Axel Springer came up with? A newspaper, as you all know, was a wonderful business, because thanks to the paper, it combined, and really only thanks to the physical paper, it combined 3 different businesses, and we made money 3 times. First of all, we sold our journalistic content to the consumers. Then we declared the consumers as target group for advertising and sold them to advertisers. And then we said, great, we have space left over in our newspaper. Why don't we allow consumers to sell their cars, to sell their real estate, or to look for new jobs? The classified advertising space. And so looking for a new job, looking for a car, was exactly in the same business as reading the interview with Donald Trump or Angela Merkel, or looking at an advertising for a banking or finance product. That had nothing in common. Looking for a car, reading an article about Trump, or seeing an advertising for a banking or finance product, only tied together through the paper. Obviously, the internet has made it very obvious that these things do not belong together. It is much better to search for a new job or a new house or apartment on a specialized website and to read the interview about Donald Trump with Donald Trump in a site specialized on content. And the same is true for a lot of the marketing, where it is much more efficient to focus on interaction between brands and consumers than to just put a display ad up. And that explains also somewhat the crisis of the display advertising business online. So very simply, we said these are the 3 businesses. We've got very lucky for 60 years because they were tied together through paper. The internet has ripped it apart. So let's do these 3 businesses. And that was pretty much the strategy of Axel Springer in the digitization. Then we set out, and that is very important for the journalistic part. There is a huge debate now. There was a huge debate, and it's still ongoing. Luckily, it is now, to a certain extent, being solved. Will readers pay for content? And yes, the answer is very simple. They do pay for content if they believe that the content is worthwhile, unique, and good enough so that they do not want to miss out on it, even if they have to pay for it. And we started only 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, to charge for our largest online offering, built in a freemium model. So there's parts that are for free, and then there's parts that are always paid for. And we have managed in the so-called freemium model to gather almost 350,000 subscribers in the last 4 to 5 years, and they contribute a significant amount to the revenue of built online offering right now. And at the same time, and that's why the headline reads, "Cannibalize yourself and it will not happen." At the same time, the reach of built, so the part of the offering that is still free, has not declined. Again, it's only due to strong, independent content, original content that you do not find otherwise. And that is still the same old truth that will set you apart, your offerings apart. And that is also the only way to set you apart from the big distribution monopolies, Facebook, Google, and so on. If you have content that the reader wants to have, then you will be able to have a strong position also in the digital space. Sometimes the internet is just better, and so in the case of our so-called classified advertising, which, by the way, was in the past, in the traditional newspaper business model, at least for regional publishers, always the largest profit share. In most cases, 50, even 60% of a regional publisher's profit came from classified advertising. And this is again the case if you were able to successfully gain market positions in the most important classified advertising sections online. And there is 3. It's the jobs, the cars, and the real estate. And there, in most markets, you have to be either number one, or perhaps in big markets you can also afford to be number two. That again is not very different from the times of the printed newspaper, where in most cities, if you wanted to advertise for real estate jobs or cars, there was just one newspaper that did the trick and had a huge market share. And that is the same because there's beneficial effects to the largest supply creates the largest demand and vice versa. And so that has allowed us to become the world's largest classifieds operator by acquiring strong assets throughout Europe and Israel, and these are numbers from 2015 because not all of these companies are publicly listed and publish all their numbers, but they will not have changed all that much. At least the ranking will not have changed. And so that has allowed us to also internationalize our business much easier, because one of the big barriers in the past in the print world of publishing were always cultural and language barriers. It is much more difficult to publish a newspaper in France than to operate a real estate classified advertising site. So there, the cultural differences are much smaller, and the similarities between a real estate classified site in France, Belgium, or Germany are much smaller than the one running a newspaper. And so we have been able to make this the backbone of the financial success of Axel Springer. But we also said, how can we change journalism and how can we take advantage of new journalistic methods, AI, and combine AI and human intelligence? So we have thought out also new partnerships for distribution, and that's what Upday combines. We all know that on the distribution side of our content, we have to rely a lot on Google and Facebook, so we have sought out alternatives way of distributing content. And as it turns out that Samsung has, in most European markets, a 40% or 40+% market share for mobile phones, smartphones. And so 4 out of 10 smartphones are sold in Europe are by Samsung. And we have struck a deal with Samsung, whereby Samsung agreed to put our Upday app right on the front, on the home page. So it's the prime real estate that we have exclusively or guaranteed on all Samsung phones in most European markets. And that guarantees us distribution, just like in the old times in the newsstand, when you were right at the checkout and your title was always at the checkout. This is a clear advantage, and that allows us to give us independent distribution from Facebook or Google for that matter. And there we have combined what we think makes the most sense. There is content which is customized for you and which is selected by your own choices. So, in order to avoid the so-called filter bubble, we also always provide the consumers with must-read, where journalists decide if that is the news of the day and that should be read by everyone. So you get a combination of your own selections plus what editors believe should be the common most important topics of that day. And you can see that in very little time, we have been able to grow Upday into the largest news app in Germany, even in UK number 3 and France number 2, and it's growing very, very successfully. The same we have done in a different way, because we believe now that in the internet world, obviously English is the international language. More and more people speak English, are able to read in English. We decided relatively early on to acquire Business Insider for a significant amount of money. Analysts thought we overpaid it. We think we made a great deal. And Business Insider is on the way to become the true leading financial and business information for the new generation of the world. We have 120 million unique users, grown 6 times. We have enormous video views and monetization is growing very, very successfully. Why? Because again, we invest in content. We make sure that we don't only have eyeballs for the sake of eyeballs, that we have true qualitative content. We hire journalists that write online stories that can go out and investigate and make people also ultimately pay. We will also, or we have started introducing also a pay model for Business Insider, and I'm hopefully sure that we will also be successful with that. And that's the outcome. In the last 10 years, we have grown our digital revenue from 200 million to 2.5 billion. And we have grown our EBITDA, and I just see the nicest number is missing, from 37 million to 528 million in 2017. And while in 2007 or 2006, digital only accounted for 1% of Axel Springer's activity. It now accounts for over 80% of our activity. But so I say so far so good, because we obviously have now escaped the pond of the print publishers, who were a nice pond with nice fish, salmon, carps, or whatever was swimming there, and the water was slowly declining. Now we jumped into a big pool, the digital pool. There is lots of water, the sea is rising, but there's huge sharks circling around us, Facebook, Google, Amazon. And so we have to find a strategy how, because we are still carps or perhaps salmons, how we can survive against these, or together with these Facebooks, Googles, Amazons of this world, who will never be true friends of us. We have to clearly acknowledge that they are frenemies at best. So this true strategy is a hard one to compete, but the most fundamental one is you have to have great content, and you have to believe in your content, and you have to make sure that you keep as many as possible of the reader relationships and customer relationships directly with yourself. You should also, as much as possible, do the advertising sales by yourself or jointly with other publishers. Never ever hand that out entirely to any of the big platforms, because this will be a bear hug that you will not survive in the long run. And you can see, especially in the US now, and especially in the video space, where there is traditionally always has been a war between the TV networks and the cable companies. And that was also a war about distribution. Sometimes the big cable companies had the upper hand because the TV network had lousy content. But if the TV networks had great content, they were able to pressure the cable networks to accept their terms. And this is what we have to strive for, that we produce enough great content, make the readers aware of that content, that we can also ask our fair share while working and cooperating with these great platforms that then can help us gain reach. This is in few words, the simply said but not easy to execute strategy that we also, as all wonderful salmons here in the room, will successfully survive in sharks' times. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Will you take a question if there is one?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. If you have a question, do raise your hand. And don't forget the usual protocol. Just let us know where you're from and before you get to your question. I guess one from me to start with. Yesterday we had that interesting idea that in some ways it's print that needs to be protected within a company that's now largely digital. Do you see a point for Axel Springer where print becomes almost an endangered species because digital is so strong?
Well, it's not an endangered species, but what we have now just done, after having merged all the operations between print and digital, we have now decided, not in the newsroom will remain totally combined, that the specialty of print and the specialty of digital in distribution, advertising, and so on, and marketing are so different that we now separate the specialists again and have print specialists and digital specialists. So that we are sure will allow us to also stay best in class in print, because obviously we also want to fight for every piece of newspaper that is sold on the newsstand or via subscription.
Makes absolute sense. So just any last calls for questions, do raise your hand. And if not, can I ask you please to thank Andreas? Thank you very much.